I guess you all know my name is Andrew now. I do have a jewelry store downtown in Elizabethtown. It's across from the Chinese restaurant next to the Pita Pit. If any of you frequent those places, you should stop by and say hello. But a little bit about who I am and my store. It's called Andrew Douglas Jewelers. So people mistakenly call me Mr. Douglas frequently. You're welcome to, but Douglas is my middle name, not my last name. My store is kind of, it's all things to all people. We do everything there, from changing watch batteries, which we change about 150 a month, to doing repair services for customers, sizing rings, fixing broken rings, custom design, engagement rings, all sorts of things. Let me tell you a little bit about my story and how I got to be where I currently am. So I grew up with a father who's a business owner. So I kind of grew up in that environment, that entrepreneurial mindset. He started working as a press operator at a print shop actually right before I was born, and worked his way up to buying it from the previous owner and growing it from around 20 employees to 120 at its peak. So business was always part of the conversation at the dinner table. And then on top of that, my parents' friends tended to be business owners of some sort, whether they were like farmers. I mean, I grew up in Lancaster County, whether they owned a farm or a trucking business, a construction firm. So I was really just thrown into that environment. So then I worked for my father growing up, which I never liked. It was a print shop, and so I stood behind a machine all day and I took paper off the back of a machine, and a 4-hour shift just felt like I was working 10 hours. I even remember working with one of the full-time employees on a press and him saying to me, "This is why you go to college, so you don't have to do this for the rest of your life." Which was funny, but to some degree it was true. My brain wasn't built for that factory type environment. So when I was in college, my sophomore year, I was still working for my dad. I hated it. And working for your parents, you can kind of get away with a few things that most employees can't. So I would get away with those things. I wasn't growing up. So I decided on my own, I'm going to go get a real job, and I'm going to work at the mall. So I walked into Park City. The first clothing store I walked into, they asked me to fill out I asked for an application. They said, "Why don't you fill it out right now?" And then they gave me a little 10-minute interview and hired me on the spot. And I was making $6.50 an hour, and I thought I was rich. And lo and behold, I realized they hired me because they were just about to go out of business and were having trouble keeping employees around. So I worked for them for about 5 months before they went out of business. And the thing was, I loved it. I mean, it was clothing retail, but I had so much fun with it. It wasn't the folding the shirts or ringing people up at the register. It was the interacting with customers that I just loved. And because the business was going out of business, they had us actively selling, which isn't typical for clothing retail. Like, we were trying to convince people why these $140 Lucky Jeans were worth it, or why they should buy a pair of Doc Martens. So we'd have little sales contests, and I had a ton of fun with them. So when they went out of business, my mother, wise old sage that she is, and she would punch me for saying that, but she said, "You should try something with commission because you love selling." So I was like, all right. I interviewed at a jewelry store just down the wing at Park City, and they hired me a month and a half before Christmas. I was still in college. I ended up working, like after finals, I worked full-time essentially those last 2 weeks before Christmas, and I just loved it. I thought it was the greatest thing in the world. I was making $9 an hour and commission, which I was thrilled with. And it was like I went to work and they paid me to talk to people all day, and then if they bought something from me, then they paid me even more. So it was like, it can't get any better than this. So I stuck with it because I really enjoyed the industry. I went from working part-time at one store to just moving across. How many of you have been to Park City? I mean, you know, the jewelry stores all around the center. There used to be 7 of them. I think they're down to 4 or 5 now. But just went across the hallway to another jewelry store, started there and worked full-time. And during that process, when I was working at the mall, I had just stopped in and talked with the business owner of a small jewelry store in the town I'd grown up in. And he said, you know, I told him I was working in jewelry and I was really enjoying it, and asked him if he ever needed somebody to consider me, and he told me he would. And I kind of thought he was just being nice, and he called me 6 months later. We sat down for a couple interviews, and he wanted to bring me on board and eventually have me move into a management role with him. So that's what happened. And there was a huge difference between working in corporate retail and working in private retail. In corporate retail, you really only do one thing, and that's sell. That's the only part of the business you're really involved with. I mean, stocking inventory and doing showcases, but it's still all sales related. So I went from working at the mall to working for a private store where all of a sudden we did everything there. We were HR, we were inventory management, we were buying, we were doing all that. And since I was in a management role, I was fortunate enough to learn the back side of my industry as well as the front side. So I wore a lot of hats. My predominant role was sales manager, but I was also a salesman. I was HR, I was the trainer, I was the scheduler. I wasn't good at all of those things, but they were all parts of what I did. I was also a buyer. Like, I got into loose diamond buying, which is a lot of fun, and helping purchase inventory for stock, which was, I mean, it was a lot of fun. I get to sit down with this supplier who literally, they wheel in like a suitcase, and it's got like $1.5 million worth of jewelry in it, and they just start throwing it out on the table, and you go through it and go, yeah, we could sell this. No, we couldn't sell that. It was fun. So by the time I was 25, 26, I had grown as much as I could at that current store. So my direct boss was the owner and his wife, which had its own challenges, having two bosses, but I made it work. And I couldn't grow anymore. So it was either I'm maxed out already at 25, I leave here and go to a more corporate jewelry store where I end up having to move to Advance. And I didn't want to move. I like Lancaster. I don't know what's wrong with me. The third option was go out and do it on my own. So that's what I decided to do. I was in a fortunate position in that my father, being a business owner, was willing to go into business with me. My father is very much a businessman, so it wasn't just like, here's some money, go open a store. It's very formal. We have a formal partnership agreement. He was a 51% owner when we first started. I'm buying him out of his shares slowly. I've bought back about 6% of it since we opened. And it'll take me probably 7 to 10 years to buy him out. And he's going to double his money on his investment in me. But that was a good thing for me because it helped give me the drive to make sure my store succeeded. It wasn't just like mommy and daddy are giving me money, go see if you can make it happen. This was very real for me. So now business now. I've actually been open 3 years this month. We opened in March 2012. And it's been way better than I ever expected. We kind of had a Cinderella year, our first full year open. It was incredible. It slowed a little bit, but it's still very good. Like I said, we changed 1,500 watch batteries a year. I mean, that pays my lease at my store twice over. I now have 1 full-time and 2 part-time employees. Again, we're doing a lot more business than I ever expected. I've been able to get involved in like the chamber, come here and speak to you guys, and do things locally. And it's been great. I've loved it. So I brought a few pictures of my store. There's my logo. But so this was the before. You can see it had lovely carpet, and the red trim was just very in style. It had actually been, maybe I shouldn't ask how many of you know what this is, but it had been a head shop for, for about a year before I moved in. They had been selling bath salts and synthetic marijuana. So while we were in there like demoing, I'd have people wander in asking for it. But they would always say, where's the candle shop or where's the cigar shop, which we knew what they really wanted. Part of being small is I had a small budget. So most of the work that was done in the store was done by me and my family or by my handyman that had worked at my house. So here is during teardown. We actually kept those cases with the red on them and refurbished them. And here is how the store ended up. So there's our front windows. at Christmas time. And the top there you can see what the store looks like now. We've updated the lighting a little bit since, but otherwise that's what it looks like. And I figured I should do a little promotion. So there's some of the bracelets we sell. They're much like the Alex and Ani, which I'm guessing a few of you ladies have heard of. And then up in the top corner, it's kind of the inexpensive that we do, because those bracelets are 25 bucks. And then that's a die-struck vintage engagement ring, which would be in the neighborhood of $7,000 to $10,000. So we kind of do everything in between. With that size center, you could do a smaller one. But anyway, that's a little bit of what we do. So before I get into this next part, another little preface about myself. I am a businessman. I was never a business major. Most of you probably have more of the head knowledge than I do. I could talk to you about jewelry all day long, the ins and outs of jewelry, the history, how the wholesale market works and how it's changed. But when it comes to marketing and advertising, I'm still learning. When it comes to training staff, I stink at it, but I'm still learning. But I have a lot of real world business experience, so which has benefited me. So, and one more thing I want to say before I get into this model, one thing to think about when you think about jewelry is it's really a luxury. It's like the luxury of luxuries. It's not clothes, food, or shelter. You don't need it as much as I wish you did. And it's, when you think of luxuries, like, you know, a novel that you read for enjoyment is a luxury. A movie that you go see is a luxury. A new handbag is a luxury. But those luxuries are either inexpensive to a degree or practical. You know, a computer's a luxury to some degree. Jewelry is, it really, as much as I like to say it does something for you, it communicates emotion. It looks sparkly, but that's all it does, and it's pretty tiny. So when we saw 2008 happen, we saw big changes in our industry. So I want to talk about the old model, the model before 2008. So before 2008, jewelry stores worked on this idea of a one-time turn, meaning you turn your inventory over one time in a year. So if you have $1 million worth of product and you sell $1 million worth of product, based on the way our industry was currently working, we're actually pretty profitable. Other retail industries don't work that way. Their turns are much higher, but they have much lower profit margins. So we did have higher margins. A lot of jewelers don't like to talk about this, but before 2008, like some jewelers would have 300 or 400% markups on their goods. Now they might run discounts, but it was pretty common if a jeweler bought a ring for $2,000, they'd put it in their case for $6,000. They might discount a little bit to sell it, but that was pretty normal. So you could get away with only selling through your inventory one time in a year, because if you sold $1 million worth of inventory in a year, you'd probably have $500,000 to $600,000 in gross profit to pay your expenses and operating costs and yourself and your employees. And at that point, we were still kind of in the economic boom. Money came fairly easily to people. It doesn't so much right now. I mean, you had, you know, dual income families, jobs were paying well. We didn't have the expenses then we do now. It's like now families of 4 have a couple $100 cell phone bill, a couple $100 cable bill, while everything else is going up in cost. But we didn't have some of those things in 2008, or at least not to the extreme we do now. So jewelry was easy. Then 2008 happened and everything changed, because we are a luxury of luxuries. There was a change in the way people were shopping. So we saw a lot of online retail, which had kind of been an annoyance before 2008 to jewelers, but it wasn't big competition. Now all of a sudden in 2008 that changed. We also saw a huge rise in our cost of goods. So I'm guessing most of you don't follow the gold market very closely, but gold is like 4 to 5 times higher today than it was a decade ago. When I started in the industry in 2005, it had just started to climb. It had been $300 an ounce for gold for 25 years. And it hit 500 right when I started. And then it hit 1,000, then it hit 15. It got up to $1,800 an ounce. So the cost of our goods was rising. Like the chain we used to sell for 50 bucks, I had to sell for $200 now. And the little white gold solitaire that we sold for $75 was $300. It was a big challenge, and the part of the problem was retail prices couldn't absorb our wholesale rise. So our margins drop. And you couple that with the competition from online, now, I'll be frank with you, if I saw a $5,000 engagement ring, it probably cost me $4,200 to $4,500 to make it. So it's a challenge. So lowering of margins. And then the big thing was, the other big thing is customers value for one-of-a-kind pieces. So every lady today wants an engagement ring that no other lady has. Yes? Yeah? Okay, that's what I thought. Make sure I'm right. 50 years ago, you walked into a jewelry store and the guy's options were 4 prongs or 6. That was really it. Today, it's a lot more challenging. I can't do bridal if I don't have 100 or 150 different rings for a young lady to look at and have the option to customize many of them. So we saw this huge jump in the consumer need for custom design. So we started to realize some problems with our old model. Nowadays, $1 million in inventory doesn't fill up a store like it used to. It gets you half as much if you're lucky. So now we were having trouble buying the inventory to put in the cases. And with our lowering margins, it used to be, again, if you had $1 million store, you had $500,000 or $600,000 of gross profit to work out of. Now it's if you sell that $1 million, you're lucky if you have 200. So it's a big change in our industry, and my industry is one that does not like to change. It's thousands of years old. Jewelers tend to be old school. They don't like to embrace technology. Took them forever to get on board with social media. They don't like to do things differently, but our old model doesn't work because of the lowering of margins. You know, when I talk about this customization, or what we consider special order, it really hurts cash flow if you're trying to operate in that old model. Because, okay, so you have a $5,000 ring here that the customer really likes. And you might have paid $4,000 for it. So they really like it, but they want to tweak this little thing about it. So you have to make them a new one, which still costs you $4,000. So instead of selling that $5,000 one, having $5,000 in cash flow, in cash to pay your expenses, you're making a $5,000 one that you have to pay for immediately. It costs you $4,000, so you have a fifth of the cash available after the transaction's done to operate your business out of. So that old model we were running just wasn't working anymore. So I was fortunate that I was working in a management position in private retail, and I got to see some of the ways my industry was headed and the way that the current economy was affecting business, not just from jewelry, but also with my father being a business owner, from his perspective, and then a lot of my customers in retail, in luxury retail, were local small business owners. So I got to see a lot of perspective. So it changed my idea of how I thought a business should be run. So I have adopted this new model for operating a store. I have lower inventory levels than most jewelry stores due to what we call prototypes. So, as an example, are any of you planning on getting the Apple Watch? I'm the only one here, probably. Okay. I'm excited for it because I love watches. But I was reading an article the other day that for the Apple Watch, you actually have to schedule a 15-minute appointment before they even come out to go in and preview them. So you're not actually going to take that Apple Watch home with you. You're going to look at a model, customize it to your needs, and they're going to make it for you essentially and send it to you. You're not taking the one out of the store. Jewelry typically didn't operate that way. You looked at a piece, you took it home with you. So we're starting to slowly see our industry move in that direction of, we call them prototypes. So when you come into my store, almost my entire bridal collection, it's about 150 rings. I'd say 130 of them are what we call prototypes. They're made out of base metal, and they're set with cubic zirconia. And my customers don't know a difference. I have people come in all the time and go, "Your diamonds are so beautiful," and I just say thank you, but they're fake. Now we carry loose diamonds, they're real, and I can make that ring, I can have it the next day real, but instead of it costing me $1,000 to put that ring in my case, it cost me $50 for the prototype. And then I've had people steal them, because they don't know they're fake, and so every once in a while a ring disappears, and they probably try and put it on Craigslist or something just to find out, but whatever. See, then it doesn't hurt me too much when that ring is stolen, because again, it was only $50, not $1,000. But it's one of the ways that our model is changing. A lot of jewelers are not on board with it. They don't like the idea because it's not how they've done business in the past. But I could see the way things were changing, and so that's what I've adopted. I have learned some things as well. Prototypes, as we call them, only really work in bridal. They don't work in fashion jewelry. Because if a guy comes in, most likely the birthday or anniversary he's shopping for is that day or the next day. And we don't always have a chance to get the real one in for him before he needs it. So the prototypes and the fashion jewelry, I tried them, they didn't work. But in bridal, in wedding bands, they work very well for me and help me keep my operating costs low. So I also have a focus on customization. I actually have some pretty cool 3D CAD software where we can sit down with you and build a ring in a 3D environment, and we can do it lots of ways. It could be, I've done it where I've custom designed an engagement ring for a customer from ground up and supplied everything in that ring. I've done others before where a customer has brought me, you know, a whole bunch of diamonds or one diamond that's a family heirloom, and we've built a ring around what they have. As an example, I had a lady bring me a ring with 70 diamonds in it. And we took all 70 of them out, made 3 new rings in my CAD software for her. The CAD software is great because it has rendering technology similar to what they use to make 3D animated movies today. It's very lifelike. So we can literally put the ring on a hand and get a lifelike image. Actually, if I go back, that top corner is a rendering, the wedding set. That's not a live image, that's a computer generated image. So they look very realistic. Another focus that we've seen in the industry that I focus on is pre-owned jewelry. We call it estate. It sounds nicer. But generally speaking, the used jewelry market is typically half of a comparable new piece. So I've invested heavily in that. I go to auctions to buy, I buy online, consumers that come into the store and I buy things from them. I normally don't tell the story if it's a broken engagement or divorce. We don't tell people that one. But sometimes we pull the stones out of the setting and melt the setting down and then reuse the diamond on its own. But it's a cost savings to my consumer. We explain it to them, but it makes it easier for them to buy. So last year, I think almost a quarter of my business was estate jewelry. So that's a way I've really gone. I've also, during the golden years of jewelry, before 2008 happened, jewelers were really mostly focused on selling, and the service side of our business started to fall off a little bit. And then when everything changed, your consumer who used to maybe buy at Christmas time would now go, well, we can't afford to buy, but I have this ring from a decade ago that it broke, I'd like to get it fixed. They'd take it into a store and maybe have a bad experience because those stores were still sales focused and not service focused. And they'd turn the customer off. I'd end up seeing them in my store. We'd handle their repair for them, take care of it. And then, you know, 2 years down the road, guess where they're coming to buy a pair of earrings or buy a new anniversary gift. So we're a very, very service-oriented store. That's my focus. Probably 80% of our transactions are service-related, whether it's a watch battery, sizing a watch band, or you know, sizing a ring. That's a huge part of what we do. And then another part to my business model is the small personal feel. So not only, like, a lot of my guys that come in the day before Christmas, I know their wives, I've met them, I know their style, or my staff does, and so we can help them. Guys hate jewelry. A jewelry store is the second least favorite place for a guy to shop. Clothing for a lady would be the most hated place for a guy to shop. But guys don't like jewelry stores, so we make it as easy as we can on them. That's why that personal feel works for me, because again, I know who they are, I know the styles and the taste of their wife, my staff does. We even do this wish list program where when ladies come in and see something they like, we save it into their profile on the computer, so when he does come in, it can be 5 minutes in and out. No stress for him. The other part of having a personal feel is that my customers somewhat feel responsible for my business. they want me to do well because they've gotten to know me and they like me, right, Debbie? And so, I mean, it's not something it's not like I try and get to know them so that they want to spend money in my store, but it's a natural outflow of that. Being small and personal with your customer is that they feel some ownership. They want to see you do well, and sometimes they'll spend more money because of it. So it's worked very well for me. All right, let's see what I got next here. There we go. So, there's one thing I want to talk about before I get to this. Part of what has shaped my view on small is stress. So, going through the economic downturn, I worked for a large jeweler that had about 15 employees. For a jewelry store, that's a big jewelry store. And my dad still owned his business, and he had about 120 employees. As businesses grow, so do budgets, so do payrolls, so do expenses. So does stress, so does commitments. The jewelry store I was working in, I saw how that affected my boss, the owner of the store. I saw him stressed out. You could tell days he was paying bills because he was a little grumpy. To some degree, you could even see that him and his wife's social commitments became engaged, or were built around affluent groups so that they could make connections with people that could hopefully come into the store and buy. I saw their life consumed by their business and realized that's not something I necessarily want for myself. I also, again, watched my father. With him, it wasn't retail, but he had 120 employees. Many of them were the main income for their families, so he felt like he had all these families that were dependent on the success of his business. He also had, normal business loans on equipment for millions of dollars, and business wasn't coming in. It stressed him out to the point of depression, where he was on medication for a time. So I watched those things in my life, or in my work and personal life, and realized they weren't things that I wanted for me. Do I want to be successful? Do I want to live a comfortable life? Yes. But money or success is not more important than my quality of life. So that's why I don't want a large jewelry store with 15 employees and millions of dollars in inventory. I don't want that stress in my life. Right now, only 3 years in, it's easy, it's profitable, life is comfortable, and then I can enjoy my personal life. I don't have to have my store constantly on the brain like some business owners do. So that was really important to me, and it's affected how I see my business. Now, there are some challenges to having a small business, and one is you wear a lot of hats. So I wore a lot of hats working for a private business. I wear even more now. I do marketing and advertising, and that has been quite the learning curve. Again, probably most of you business students know more about it than myself. Some of you are majoring in it, I'm sure. I've had to learn it on the go and on the fly, and it's not necessarily a strength of mine. I get to do the things I'm good at. I get to sell to my customer and interact with my customer, and that I love to do and I'm good at, but there's parts of it that I'm still learning and will never be great at. So that kind of flows into the next one, is that in a small business, you can't always play to your strengths. I'm not at a size where I can hire an HR person or hire someone for marketing and advertising. I can't afford to do those things because of the size of my business. I don't have it in my budget. So I've got to do those things myself. And sometimes it sucks doing things you're not good at. But I still have to do them anyway. Another challenge is I'm always on the call. When my alarm system goes off at 3 a.m., I'm the one going in to make sure the store wasn't robbed. We just had water damage at the store, and I had to have a restoration crew in. They always wanted to be in at 7. We normally don't start till 10. That's one of the great things about retail. But I had to be there at 7 to let them in. And there are sacrifices you have to make. If I built some giant, huge, successful store, I could have maybe this big, amazing office. I could have enough staff that I could go on vacation whenever I want. Right now, I get 1 week of vacation a year, and will for the foreseeable future. But my everyday life is a lot less stressful and enjoyable. Some of the benefits are you can make your own schedule to a degree. Now, I work in retail, so if I wanted to be open 7 to 2 every day. That's not going to work. Retail hours can't be like that. But I can set it to a degree. So with my store, I decided I've never had, my entire working career, I'd never had a 2-day weekend. Because working at the mall or working for a private store, I'd get like Sunday and Thursday off, or Monday and Friday, weird days, and never got to actually have those 2 days in a row to rest and relax. So when I set up my own store, I'm closed Sundays and Mondays. I decided I need a weekend. It's not like a normal person Saturday, Sunday, but it's still 2 days in a row that I can rest and relax. Any stress that I am feeling, I can deal with, handle, and come back to work refreshed on Tuesday. I love it. And like I was saying, I close the store for a week. It actually ends up being 10 days. I close it the week of 4th of July every year, and I go on vacation. There's a lot of retail people that will say you never ever close the store, you're open every day if you want to do maximum business. Well, going back to that being having a personal feel is my customers know I'm a person. I'm not a company. I'm a person to them. So they understand that, you know, I have to have my vacation. I have to have my time to myself, and they don't fault me for it. Will I potentially lose out on some sales or some amount of business because of it? Yeah, but I'm okay with that. I want quality of life outside of my work as well. And I talked about stress, and I come back to it. With a small business, to some degree, you can decide how much stress you can handle. There's always going to be stressful parts to life, but I can decide not to be open 7 days a week and feel like I have to be at the store 7 days a week. And I can hire an extra part-timer so that I can go home early 1 day a week. I can make those decisions. Another great thing is you're in control. I realize I'm not following them in order, but I'm totally in control of my store and how it's operated. So I set rules, but I can bend them because it's my store. So as an example, we have a layaway program. Technically, you need to put 20% down, and it has to be paid off in 6 months. That's the technical rule. Well, I had a guy that came in, and he's literally a nuclear physicist, and his wife has him on a $50 a week allowance. So, and he wanted to buy something for their 35th anniversary, but he has no way to pay for it without her knowing, because she does all the finances. So he squirreled away like a couple bucks a week and would come in once a month to give me $20 on this $500 ring. And I let him do it for 1.5 years. So that definitely bent my rules, but then he gave it to her, she was surprised, she loved it, she ended up buying a ring to match it. He sent a bunch of people into my store. You know, me being able to bend those rules to meet my customers' needs has really worked well for me. And I enjoy that I have that control. And I also enjoy I'm in control and I don't have anybody telling me what to do. That's fun. Then there is that feeling of accomplishment. You always hear this thrown out there, but knowing that my business is successful and that, not to toot my own horn, but some of it is because of me, there's a feeling of accomplishment there that you can't, like a MasterCard commercial, it's priceless. And I love that. So, my final thoughts as I finish up here. I didn't talk a lot about how you stay small and profitable. But this is the biggest thing. It's easier to save $1 than to make $1. So for me to make $1, I have to sell a whole bunch of jewelry. But if I can save $1 here by sending one of my employees home a half hour early, if I can go buy paper towels at the dollar store instead of Giant, little things like that, when you're small, can make a huge difference, because that's just like putting more and more profit into your pocket. You don't have to sell more. I'm sure that you've learned in marketing classes how expensive it is to get a new customer in your store. I don't remember the exact stat, but it's something like 10 times more expensive to get a new customer in your store than to keep an existing customer. That goes with staying with this as well. It's to make that extra $1, to make that extra sale, to make up that $1 that I could have saved, it's a lot of work. And then to me, again, this is just, I don't know if you'll ever learn this in a business class, but to me, quality of life is measured by more than how much money you make. Money is important. Money makes life comfortable, but it doesn't make you happy. So anyway, any questions?
What was your major?
Biblical studies. I went to Lancaster Bible College. I thought I was going to be a music minister. and found out that wasn't for me. Go ahead.
How many hours a week do you work?
Well, 11 months out of the year, it's somewhere in the neighborhood of 40 to 45. At Christmas time, it's like 70. So that's my one exception. At Christmas time, my store's open all the time, and I'm there every hour it's open. In jewelry, we do somewhere in the neighborhood of 30% of our business for the year in a month. And of that 30%, 15, or half of it, so 15% of your business for the year is done in the last 5 days, because men are last minute and they are the ones generally making the jewelry purchases. So, yep. Any more? Go ahead.
What, in your opinion, does corporate retail in the jewelry store have over private retail?
Accessibility. I mean, that's a complaint I don't hear it often, but I hear people say, oh, it's hard for me to make it in here while you're open. They still do. That's one of them. You probably shouldn't get me started on corporate retail. Generally speaking, it's a totally different, it's a different customer even. Corporate retail is typically very, in jewelry, is price-based, not quality-based. I've always explained it to people as corporate or mall retail is typically, they're retailers who happen to do jewelry. I'm a jeweler who happens to retail. So I look at it from again, that service perspective I was talking about. It's more than just selling product.
How do you market your business?
That's another thing I've learned and figured out over time here. I call it, I have a term for it, and I call it hyper-localized marketing. So I really only market if I can guarantee that my marketing dollars are going to the Elizabethtown, Mountjoy area. I don't market outside of that zone. Part of that is I'm a new business now. There had been a jeweler in the location I'm in, but they had closed in 2007. Then there was a flower shop, then the head shop, and then me. So a lot of E-Town residents had forgotten there was a jewelry store in E-Town, and they'd started to go other places. So my goal the first 5 years, I figured it would take about 5, was just to communicate to the Elizabethtown area that I'm here. So almost all of my marketing has been hyper-localized. So I do print. I have not actually gotten into online marketing, and that has to do with my customer base. Again, it's a luxury. Most people don't really start buying jewelry besides an engagement ring. They don't buy jewelry regularly until kids are out of the house. So most of my best customers are typically 55 to 65. So like merchandiser or Lancaster paper print doesn't work for me, but direct mail actually does. There's something unique to Elizabethtown, Mountjoy area called Local Marketplace. It's an advertisement, but I've done that. I've also found stories work really well. So when the Local Marketplace always has one featured story on the front. So I had been on the front cover of it when I first opened, and we got a huge response from that. It was expensive, but it was funny though. I paid to be on the front of the page, right? And people would see me and they'd be like, oh, congratulations. Like they thought I got picked for something. And I was like, oh, thank you. It was expensive, but thank you. Go ahead.
Do you ever consider opening another store?
I've thought about it. And with my business model, I'm not sure how it would work. Because I didn't really talk about this, but another aspect of why my business has been successful is because I am local. So with jewelry, trust is a huge, huge part of it. And I grew up in the Mountjoy E-Town area. My parents were both grew up in the Mountjoy E-Town area. And so I have connections with a lot of people locally, and that's another big part of why my store has been successful. So I'm not sure how that would work for me if I were to try and open a second location. And I'm so far from getting there anyway. Anyway, I'm still in my 3rd year. And that, I think, would even go back to what I was talking about with stress. That would be extremely stressful. I'm not sure if I'd want that for myself. Talk to me in 10 years, I might have a different tune, but as of right now, I probably wouldn't. Yes, Debbie.
How much involvement does your father still have?
He has almost none, and he never has.
He doesn't ask?
No, I mean, we talk about it, but he doesn't know anything about retail or jewelry. So he kind of stays out of it because he knows that I know what I'm doing and trusts me to run it. Now, it might be a little different if we started running in the red, but as of right now, he knows I'm making it work, making it happen. And I mean, typically they say it takes, I think, 5 years for you to turn a profit in retail. I turned it in my first full year. So we were open 9 months in 2012. 2013 we were profitable. 2014 we were profitable. So, which is uncommon. So yeah, he keeps his nose out of it, thankfully. Yeah.
I have two questions.
Sure.
One is, how do you stay on top of styles? Do you go somewhere to learn what's new, or do you have your own ideas? And two, how do you follow the pricing? Where do you go?
Yep. Well, first off, the way I figure out style is I look at what they're doing in the big markets, and then I do it 3 or 4 years later because it's Lancaster, and we're 5 years behind most of the country. So if I do it a year early here, I look really trendy. But seriously though, that again gets back to that personal levels. I know my customers. I know their styles and what they like. I know what's pushing the envelope and what's too funky, what won't work in my market. I'm not sure how to explain how I know it other than I've been doing it for a decade working. The Lancaster market's unique. I'll give you a quick example. So I have a line in my store called Jorge Revilla. He's a Spanish designer. He works in sterling silver with cool finishes and funky styles. And I do very well with it. I do well with it at holidays, at Christmas and Mother's Day and Valentine's Day. That's when we sell it. What's funny about this is we have a very sexist term that's used in our industry called women's self-purchases. And it would be items that a woman were to buy for herself, which normally in fine jewelry, the way it works is she likes something, he buys it. That's typically the way it works. So when you can get a woman to buy something herself, that's great. Lancaster doesn't. So this line, it's $200 to $500, and in most stores it's in bigger markets where they have very affluent customers, and the lady will just come in and drop a couple $100s on herself. No big deal. She doesn't have to call home and ask if it's okay. Lancaster doesn't work that way as much as I wish that it did. So what happens for me is those $200 to $400 items the women love, they put on a wish list, and then in December, here come all the guys to buy it. And I know that's the way it's going to work. As far as how I price it, I go to trade shows, but it's actually pretty easy to figure out. We actually have a commodities list for diamonds. We call it the Rappaport. And based on their color, their clarity, their size, their shape, you can actually figure out how diamonds should be priced based on that. And then having done it for as long as I have, I can look at a piece, know what it should retail for approximately, which gives me an idea of what I think its wholesale should be, so I know if I'm getting a good price on a piece or not. So, but we have these cool, fun trade shows where you go and 1,000 wholesalers show up and put their stuff out and you shop around. It's fun. Sometimes there's free alcohol because they hope you get buzzed and buy more.